We're joined now by Sean Egan, president and founder of Egan Jones Ratings. Sean, you know, the hyper-focus is on Portugal right now, but more broadly, as Europe tries to prevent a situation like this from coming up, the solutions that they're putting forward, you see flaws in them. The bailouts themselves are creating new problems.
Yes, the structure of the bailouts isn't appropriate in our opinion. What they're doing right now is they're providing capital to the countries. What should happen is that they should be doing what's similar in the U.S., and that is the FDIC, which has a guarantee of the U.S. government, is backstopping the financial institutions' debt, basically the deposits. The ECB hasn't taken that approach yet. What they've done
Ireland did that, though, didn't they?
No, what Ireland did is the government backstop the deposits. The credit quality of the Republic of Ireland is far from the credit quality of the ECB. And you need a strong, basically currency printing entity like the ECB backstopping these deposits, or they're just going to exit the financial institutions of all the weaker countries.
And you actually think what's playing out now in Europe is worse than the credit crisis potentially that we experienced here in the U.S.?
Yes, for two reasons. One is that the EU bloc is bigger than the U.S., and perhaps more importantly is that the EU as a political institution is fairly immature. You don't have the centralized decision-making that you have in the U.S. For example, when Hank Paulson was in power, he had to make about 4 calls to get things done. In the EU, it's probably about 20 calls, and it's much more difficult to get things done. So this crisis, it's a serial crisis. You've already had 3 train wrecks in the form of Iceland, Greece, and Ireland. What's in the hopper, if you will, is Portugal, Spain, Belgium, and perhaps Italy. Any of these, it could be just one before the system starts to freeze, and people start worrying about riding the trains, basically.
And it seems like with each of these bailouts, you get that momentary, breath of, okay, this is stopping, and then we start having the exact same conversation a week later.
Exactly, or a month later, or a month and a half.
Right,
yes.
Right. So how do you stop the train wreck short of? I mean, what you're describing is a structural flaw that isn't easily fixed at all.
There are different layers to the problem. On the one layer, you have the immature EU political. It's not mature. On another layer, you have the poor credit quality of the various sovereign countries. When you get above about 70% debt to GDP problems, and we're shooting way above that. Another thing is that people don't understand. This latest auction of Portugal, they said, oh, problems are off. In reality, if you strip out the buying by the ECB, maybe they're not off the table.
Right, which was Bill Gross's point when he was on the show yesterday. Look at who's doing the buying.
Exactly. And perhaps more importantly is find out whether or not the underlying problems are going to be solved. In our view, there's no way in the world that Ireland can service the debt that it's taking on. It's taking on 200 billion euros of direct debt. They're guaranteeing another 400 adjusted. That's about 300 billion euros. They have tax revenues of only 30, and you do have to pay the federal employees. So maybe they can allocate, let's say, 7 billion for interest expense, and so they can service maybe about 70 billion euros of debt, and they're taking on, let's say, about 300. That's not going to work.
But can't you assume at this point, though, that there is that automatic backstop, that the ECB isn't going to let a country fail? I mean, that was the entire argument with moral hazard in the U.S. crisis.
It'd be nice if they structured the bailout differently and said, here's a gift. We've done that before. The U.S. has done that in the case of South America. It's not structured that way, and it creates even more uncertainty. It's the maturity of the debt is out to 2013. Probably the problem will arise even before that. We prefer in situations like this that the problem is addressed quickly and not just let it linger or try to kick it down the road. You really have to get your hand on what the debt-paying capability of these different countries are and to solve it, and solve it quickly, because what's happening is capital is leaving the institutions as they get in more and more difficulty. Now it's Portugal and Spain. Next week it might be Belgium. Then it might be Italy. Solve it so that investors know where they stand.
All right. Well, and Monday and Tuesday we'll be talking about what is the conversation underway in Brussels as they try to look at creating one of those solutions?
That's great. And you also have to keep your eye on the fund, too. We don't think it's anywhere near a AAA-rated credit. It's being marketed as such. It's far from that.
The fund being the ECB's fund?
Yeah, exactly. It's not. It doesn't have the underlying credit quality the way it's structured of a AAA-rated credit.
What does it have?
It's far from that, because what you have is guarantees from each of the entities, and the fund is investing in things that can't be paid off at 100 cents on the dollar.
That's an ominous note to leave it on. Sean Egan, thank you very much.